What I wanted to talk about today is something that I've only recently discovered myself. We had, of course, earlier this year, the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. And this is the first one in Aquarius for almost 800 years. And this is a big deal. I wanted to share with people that this image, these are the alchemical symbols for air and earth, yeah? And I gave a talk, you can find it on my YouTube channel. If you go there and look at the various videos, I gave it a couple years back when, and I talked about the nature of these elements and how air is hot and moist in the classical qualities. Air is hot and moist, and earth is cool and dry. So they do not share a quality. And this means that it's a difficult transition, because if we're transitioning, for instance, from earth to water, both earth and water are cool, which is indicated by the downward pointing triangle. They tend to, the energy goes down and in, yeah? Fire and air are hot, the energy goes up and out. So they have a common quality, so that there's an easier transition between elements when that is the case. But earth and air are very different, and so it might take a transformation from earth, right, cool and dry, and then becoming cool and moist like water before we can become hot and moist like air, right? Or conversely, we might go from cool and dry and become hot and dry like fire, and then become hot and moist like air. So that these two triangles, the smaller triangles, represent potential pathways between these two major elements. There might be a fiery path and a watery path. And it's interesting because, for instance, the last time we had the transition between air and earth, or earth and air rather, was when the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was built. And then this time around, the cathedral burned, which was very tragic, of course. But it's indicative of this idea that that this transition there's a volatile transition between these two elements. There's a watery way to transition between these elements and a fiery way. So I invite you to look at that one on my YouTube channel sometime if you want to think about this particular conjunction that we're in now, and the elemental shift that we're in now a little bit more. But today I want to talk more about the larger cycle of approximately 800 years. So being somewhat classically trained, I was lucky to, I sort of stumbled upon, I was hitchhiking through Berkeley Springs, West Virginia in my 20s, and I literally stumbled upon Project Hindsight, and they were kind enough, Ellen and Robert were kind enough to invite me in and take me in. And so I do have a firm foundation in the classical tradition. And so if we look back to the classical tradition to understand the cycle, in fact, the first person that we know of to address this cycle as a whole was Abu Musar in the 9th century Persia. And so this would be, depending on your view of what astrology is, this would be like the 3rd or 4th wave of astrology, right? Because we had Egypt and Mesopotamian astrologers practicing, and also in India, and then we had the Greek or Hellenistic wave, and then as Europe was going into the Dark Age, what we call the Dark Ages or Middle Ages, Persia was having a golden age, and so Abu Masar was part of this tradition and they had some tremendous innovations, and this is one of them, where he and Masha Allah and some of these other cats were doing some really incredible things. And what he said, and this comes from the Book of Religions and Dynasties, is one way that it's called, and it's also called On the Great Conjunctions. And I want to say, by the way, if I'm ever critical of these, I come from a place of great reverence, and I'm really happy that he did this. But of course, as a Virgo, I always want to keep improving. So if I sound critical, I want to say first that I greatly honor the fact that this is, that a 9th century astrologer was already looking at this, which is remarkable in and of itself. And one of the main ideas that is very interesting to me, especially because a lot of what I do, I put out a monthly newsletter where I have electional astrology, magical elections. And so I'll show people, oh, here's an election for the sun, for instance. Just yesterday or on Friday, I was doing some magical operations for the sun in Leo, right? If you study electional astrology, I will tell you that two things. For an election to be really powerful, it can't just be a good election in and of itself, but it also needs to be rooted in the nativity, and it needs to be rooted in the mundane charts. And when you have a good election, it's rooted in the nativity and it's rooted in the ongoing mundane charts, then you will really get something that is very powerful. And so Abu Masar is addressing that in a way here by saying that the most important mundane chart is the Aries ingress. That is the chart for the moment that the sun enters Aries, cast for the capital city of the region, right? So you cast these each year, and it would be the year of the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that occurs in early Aries, the solar ingress for that year. That would be the most important mundane chart for the last 800 years, according to Abu Masar. And then the second most important mundane chart would be the Aries ingress for one of these great mutations. So for 2020, right? The Aries ingress for 2020, or for 1980, when the conjunctions were moving into air. Okay, so that's the number 2 most important chart. And then number 3, the Aries ingress for the year where Mars and Saturn join in Cancer. Now, this is very interesting because this is a much shorter cycle. And I went through it and noticed that, yeah, when Mars and Saturn are conjunct in Cancer, it seems like there's more war going on in the world around these conjunctions. If you go back to the so-called war on terror, and I say so-called only because I myself am a pacifist. I don't believe in war as an answer to very much of anything. And so anyway, that's what people who were waging this war were calling it. And yeah, that was around the time of the Mars-Saturn conjunction in Cancer. There was this, and now, as we move away from that, now the Afghanistan is in the news, where that war doesn't seem really to have accomplished the things that the people who were waging it thought they would, anyways. So it's interesting, that cycle. And then Aries ingress preceding the most recent Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So just any old great conjunction, right, is the number 4 most important chart.